Holy Week is meant to be a time of silence, reflection, and redemption. But in certain parts of Latin America, it carries another meaning, one that is rarely spoken out loud. In old villages scattered across regions where faith shaped every street and every ritual, there is a belief that during these days the boundary between the sacred and the profane becomes unstable, not open, just vulnerable, as if something is allowed to observe but not to be fully seen. The accounts always begin the same way: subtle changes, churches that feel darker inside, even during the day, bells ringing at the wrong hours, people waking in the middle of the night with the sensation that someone is calling their name, even when they are alone. No one sees anything, but everyone feels it. Tradition says that during Holy Week, certain ancient pacts begin to breathe again. Promises made generations ago, sealed in silence, return to collect their price. Entire families avoid going out at night. Children are forbidden from playing in the streets after sunset, and doors remain closed, not out of fear of thieves, but out of respect. In some towns, there is an unspoken rule: never accept invitations after midnight during these days. Never follow someone through empty streets. And above all, never question what happens when the bells stop completely. Because according to the legend, there is a specific night. A night when prayers do not echo, when candles extinguish themselves, when what was hidden beneath religious symbols finds space to move. That is the night when Holy Week stops being holy. They call this period La Pascua Negra, and the most disturbing part is not what they say happens. It's the fact that year after year, the same stories keep surfacing, in different places with disturbingly similar details, as if something were reminding the world of what was never truly forgotten. Over time, the stories surrounding La Pascua Negra stopped focusing only on omens and strange sensations. They began to center on a specific night, one that no one is meant to fully witness. In some regions, it occurs between Holy Thursday and Good Friday. In others, during the early hours of Saturday. The date shifts, the calendar changes, but the pattern remains. There is a moment when the streets become unnaturally silent. Not ordinary silence, but a hollow absence of sound, as if even echoes had been removed. According to legend, this is the night when certain forbidden rituals find room to exist. Not public ceremonies or organized gatherings, but individual acts, performed in secrecy, passed down through whispers across generations. People who believe they can ask for something in exchange for promises that should never be made. There are reports of black candles lit inside supposedly devout homes, of inverted prayers murmured far from altars, of religious images covered with dark cloths, as if they should not see what was about to happen. All of it hidden from the community's eyes, but not from whatever is watching. Some witnesses claim they have seen figures moving through the empty streets that night. They do not run. They do not speak. They simply pass by, always keeping their distance from the light. When someone tries to approach, the sensation is immediate: pressure in the chest, a paralyzing fear, an irrational certainty that taking one more step would be an irreversible mistake. In certain villages, disappearances are directly linked to this night. People who left their homes out of curiosity, defiance, or disbelief and were never seen again. There are no signs of violence, no reliable witnesses, only absence, and the collective unease of knowing something has been broken. What is most unsettling is that after this night, everything appears to return to normal. Churches reopen, bells ring again, the streets regain their movement. But those who live there know something has changed, as if an invisible boundary had been crossed, and the cost is still being calculated. The rule, repeated in whispers, is simple. On the night of La Pascua Negra, do not observe too closely, do not question, and above all, do not try to take part, because there are things that do not want believers. They want only silent witnesses. Over time, La Pascua Negra stopped being just a legend whispered in isolated villages and took on a more unsettling role, that of a collective warning. Not about something that happens every year, but about what can happen when certain boundaries are ignored. Folklore researchers suggest that the legend emerged in regions marked by intense religiosity, where fear did not come only from the supernatural, but from the breaking of balance. La Pascua Negra is not a specific date, but a concept, the moment when faith is used as currency instead of protection. According to oral tradition, this night exists to test intentions. It does not punish disbelief nor reward false devotion. It watches, it waits, and it reacts only when someone tries to negotiate what they do not understand. That is why so many stories speak of delayed consequences, not immediate, but gradual. People who claim to have taken part in that night describe subtle changes afterward. They do not lose their sanity. They do not vanish right away, but they report a persistent feeling of no longer being alone, even in familiar places. Recurring dreams of empty streets, of candles extinguishing themselves, of voices calling their names without a clear source. In more extreme accounts, entire families abandoned their homes after Holy Week, convinced that something had been invited inside, not through a door, but through intention. The fear was not in what they saw, but in what they felt afterward. The most disturbing detail is that there is no complete ritual ever documented, no clear instructions, no manual. Because according to the legend, anyone who truly understands La Pascua Negra would never write about it. Passing the knowledge on would mean accepting responsibility for the consequences. That is why the story survives in fragments, in pieces, in incomplete warnings, in sentences that always stop just before the final explanation. Perhaps because La Pascua Negra is not about what happens on that night, but about what awakens afterward. It does not demand faith. It does not demand disbelief. It demands only a silent choice, to respect the boundary or to discover why it exists. And if this legend is still told in so many different places with such similar details, perhaps it is not because it happened in the past. Perhaps it is because it is still happening, whenever someone decides to look too far.